Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello and welcome to Getting to Know You. I'm your host, Robert Jaquay. On today's program, we're going to be talking with David Allen Miller, who is the music director of the Albany Symphony Orchestra. David has established himself as one of the leading American conductors of his generation. So we're going to talk to David about the Albany Symphony Orchestra, how it works, and especially how it makes music. So let's go meet him. I really want to thank you for agreeing to come on the show today and be a guest.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Robert. I'm happy to be here.
Before we start our conversation and get into the details, we're going to air a DVD, a short DVD that talks about the Albany Symphony, its history, a bit about you and the conductor history, and also about the programming and the whole philosophy of the orchestra. So let's take a moment now and watch that.
Great. This is the highest quality regional orchestra in America.
They're providing an environment where the Mozarts, the Haydns of tomorrow, where they can really thrive.
I am on the board of the symphony because of my love for classical music.
At times, the orchestra and the audience are on the same level, and they almost as if they were reacting what you're doing. It doesn't happen all the time. When it does, it's wonderful.
The reason why your symphony is still going strong is obvious. You are touching people with your music.
My grandfather, Maestro John Carabella, was the founder and first conductor of the Albany Symphony.
John Carabella was a composer and conductor and organist, and he came from Italy to Cahos, basically, to be the organist at the Franciscan church there.
At some point he says, I'm going to give this great city a first-rate symphony, whether it wants it or not.
One of the most striking things is how little money that the symphony actually started with. John Carabella, he used to go from door to door to door, business to business, and he would beg for money.
I think it's astounding that this orchestra of 6 people in 1931-32 could become, in 5 or 6 years, a finished ensemble.
We've had a progression of conductors, and in every case, I think, for whatever reason, and maybe that's a tribute to our board of directors, that they chose the right person for the need we had at the time.
In 1953, Edgar Curtis called me and invited me to come play.
I played for a little bit of time under Edgar Curtis, and then when Julius Hedgie came, I played under him.
Julius Hedgie certainly had an impact on this orchestra. He was wonderful in introducing the concept of American composer.
Julius always picked what he knew the orchestra could do, or perhaps something a little harder than they could do, so he could push them. I never came home without having learned something from him, because he was a superb conductor.
George Lloyd had his renaissance here.
We didn't know what we were getting into. He told me that he had never been a real conductor. He said, before I came here, I practiced for 2 months in front of a mirror.
His music was him, and he would just envelop the orchestra, and we just wanted to play, and it was so beautiful and triumphant.
And so the orchestra loved him. He was not the world's greatest conductor, but he was one of the nicest people I can think of.
Compared to other conductors, they're so stiff and unapproachable, but David was this hip, young, cool, very progressive, cutting-edge conductor, and he was doing all of these contemporary compositions and giving voice to all these young composers.
The Rolling Stones have Mick Jagger, we have David Allen Miller. He certainly brings an enthusiasm that's second to no one.
I've been here as long as I have because of my love for the ASO musicians and for the spirit of the group.
Peter Colonie really understood the dynamic of the living composer and what that could bring to an orchestra. If you were writing music, you wanted to know about Albany.
Before I became music director, the Albany Symphony already had for many years a very strong profile in the orchestra world because of its commitment to American music and to the music of living composers.
We've had Aaron Copland, we've had Charles Ives. These are composers whose works are respected around the world just like we respect the great European masters. But there are guys living today that are doing fantastic things, and they need and deserve the exposure.
The balance that the Albany Symphony strikes is very unique in the fact that this piece relates to this piece. This is the past and this is the present, and this is how we can bring them together.
The idea of art is to remind us why we're alive.
So I brought some of my scores, I showed them to David, and he said, well, we're going to do a concert of spirituals. Would you make an arrangement of a spiritual? When the Albany Symphony was playing that spiritual, it's like time had stopped. I dreamed of that moment my whole life, and it actually happened.
Immediately you understood that there was a connection here between this orchestra and the community.
I think the night that the Palace Theater reopened with the Albany Symphony accompanying Yo-Yo Ma was one of the outstanding nights in the Capital Region.
It was a dream to be able to play with Yo-Yo Ma. He was even buying Girl Scout cookies from some of the mothers in the orchestra.
It was one of the thrills that I've had in my life, and it made me fully appreciate David Miller and how accomplished he is with his moves up there.
We have our Sunday symphonies for families. Our conductor takes on a persona, his favorite one being Cowboy Dave.
And the Sunday symphonies, I don't like to miss any of them. He's a character. That's the best thing. I can remember we just sat there because we had dull times, before then, and we didn't say anything. And next thing you know, somebody...
Each performance really teaches a lesson about music and introduces you to composers. Those type of programs are so important in a community.
Partnering with the Averill Park School District, we evolved this program called Adopt a School, where each year, starting with the third graders, we do essentially 6 visits.
6 musicians came in 3rd grade, and how many musicians came in 4th? Quite a lot. Yeah, we can't really count how many.
One of them was a harpist who had come in, and she had the harp set up and played songs on it.
I like the harp.
And eventually, at the end of the year, the kids would all come down to a special concert designed for them to see the full orchestra.
It was really actually cool. We learned a lot.
I just hope that this can reach more students.
A lot of the young people in this community never would have had exposure to this type of venue if it weren't for the Albany Symphony and the commitment to the younger children.
Vanguard is the fundraising arm of the symphony. They are truly a dedicated group of individuals.
The founding of Vanguard gave heart. We moved from thinking of ourselves as just a community orchestra, but into one that was going to be a force.
My dream is that the orchestra can be so connected that it's just an indispensable aspect of everything to do with art in the community.
I'm as proud as I can be that the Albany Symphony is here, as so many other people are. It's really a treasure for the Capital Region.
I've never seen our concerts filling up as they have the last 2 years. It is amazing. The Troy Music Hall, you walk in, you don't find an empty seat.
I've always used music in my classroom, but I use it even more so now that the kids have a true appreciation for it.
Every year we get better and better.
David has just done such a fantastic job with the orchestra. That sounds so glorious. I'm sure my grandfather would be very pleased.
One of the most important things is friendships.
To have a gift to be able to play in an orchestra as good as this one with friends that I've known for many years, that's the greatest thing that could happen to me. That's why I miss it so much.
My deeply held belief is that music, great art, is indispensable. And without those things, life would be a very rough journey. And so my hope is that we can continue in ever better ways to serve the community and to bring great art to the community and to foster great art.
That was really great. It really gives us a launch pad for more of our discussion here. And one of the things I ask every guest is to give us your background, where you came from and how you got here.
Well, I'm born in Los Angeles, California, in the San Fernando Valley in 1961, so I think that makes me 45 years old. And I studied music generally along with all the normal things kids do as a kid, and then went to UC Berkeley in Northern California, in the Bay Area, did a bachelor's in music, and then I went to the Juilliard School after that and did a master's in conducting, and then I went back to Los Angeles to become the assistant and the associate conductor of the LA Philharmonic with Andre Previn, who was the conductor of the time.
Okay.
And then I came to Albany to be the music director, and in that time, as I was developing my career, I also guest conducted a great deal around the country and the world, and continued to do that.
Well, we're certainly happy you came here.
Well, and I've loved it here. I've now been here almost 14 years,
That's right.
so I'm very happy here.
That's right. Why conducting?
That's a good question. Why conducting? Well, I think for me, conducting because when I was a kid, I played trombone and I played piano, and we sang in my family. We all played folk guitar and went to musical theater performances. And my father's a vocalist and had been an opera singer and was a high school music teacher and a cantor in a large synagogue in Los Angeles. And so music was always around, and I knew I wanted to be a musician, but I wasn't sure in what area. And when I was about 15, I sort of developed this idea that conducting was a fascinating field. So I told my dad I wanted to have a conducting teacher. So he went out and found me one, this elderly German gentleman, Fritz Zweig, in Hollywood. And I started studying privately with him, and then I went to Berkeley in conducting, and that's how I got into it.
I tried it once, and let me tell you, it's not easy. It may look easy, but
it's completely easy. Figure eights. You just figure eights the whole time and smile.
But I do think you're going to have a real long life, though. It seems that the conductors live very long.
Well, I always maintain that's because you only hear about the ones who lived to be 100. Never hear about the ones who died young. But it's been a great career because you get to involve yourself in so many things in all the musical aspects of conducting, which of course are central, but also as a music director in planning and community, all the studies involved, related history, literature, languages. There's psychology. There's so much that's involved in being a successful conductor and in successfully conducting a group of very intelligent, educated musicians.
Well, they better keep their eyes on you, right?
Well, at least half of one eye is good. A little peripheral something.
When I was looking up about you, there's a quote that came out, and it was actually labeled you as a creative and compelling orchestra builder. Now, what does that mean? What is an orchestra builder?
Well, I assume that would basically mean the difference between just being a conductor, one who stands up in front of orchestras and leads them in whatever repertoire happens to be on that week or that day, and actually taking an orchestra, of which you're the music director, from point A to point B, a small orchestra to middle size, or I think in my case, the things that I'm passionate about are about building exciting and interesting new ways for orchestras to present music and for audiences to look at music. So for example, here in Albany, what's been so wonderful about my time here is I've been able to develop a whole family series, which the orchestra never had before. I've developed a whole new music ensemble, our wacky and wonderful Dogs of Desire, which only plays new works commissioned from young American composers exploring the world of popular culture. We've developed a whole month-long American Music Festival, which we do every March. So in terms of program builder, that really has more to do, and very extensive education opportunities as well that I've built with the orchestra. When you're talking about an orchestra builder, you're really talking about someone who takes the overarching offerings of an orchestra and develops new and exciting ways for them to present music.
It must have been difficult, or maybe it wasn't difficult, to come in on the heels of a well-established conductor. I mean, was that a difficult dynamic with the orchestra, or were they?
It was actually lovely. They had gone through a very long search. They'd had Mr. Hedgie here for 20-some years, and he'd been a real orchestra builder in terms of quality of the playing. I mean, he really maintained a high level of quality, so I was very fortunate to inherit an orchestra in very good shape, basically, musically, but an orchestra that had kind of not grown in terms of programming offerings.
Okay.
So we hadn't had a family series, which I found an egregious omission, and various obvious things that I thought the orchestra should have, we didn't have. And after Mr. Hedgie, there was a period of about 5 or 6 years. Jeffrey Simon, an Australian conductor, came for just under 2 years. He wasn't here very long for any number of reasons. Then they had a 2 or 3 year search, and I managed to emerge from the search as the winner of the position, which was a fantastic thing. I was just finishing my tenure in Los Angeles. I was there for 5 years, and it was time for me to go find my own place and build my own dream. And so I think it was a perfect time and place for me and for the Albany Symphony to meet each other, because they needed what I brought and I needed what they offered, and I think that's why it's worked so well for so many years.
Now, I've heard of orchestras having a sound. Some of the Boston or New York Philharmonic, there's
or
a
the
sound,
Philadelphia,
or the Philadelphia,
the string sound of the Philadelphia. Yeah.
Is that something that you can label with the Albany Symphony Orchestra? Is there a sound?
Well, actually, there's been much lamenting about the end of unique sounds for various of the great American and world orchestras. It used to be that each did have its own character, and in this international age in which we live, with international conductors jetting around from orchestra to orchestra, and orchestras aren't built so locally. The players don't all go to the same conservatory perhaps as they once did and learn the same approach to technique. There's been a real loss of specific characters to many of the great orchestras. And while I certainly feel like we've emphasized certain things with the Albany Symphony, I think we have, I don't know that I would say that we have our own special Albany Symphony sound, although I think we sort of do. We have very brilliant and bright brass. We have incredibly elegant virtuosic woodwinds. And because we do so much new and unusual music, so much American music, we have an incredible sort of precision. But I don't know that we have that any more than certain other orchestras. But what we aspire to is really to be a great and versatile orchestra, because in the modern age, of course, you're asked to play so many kinds of music, everything from Bach, 400 years old, 350 years old, up to the immediate present. So you have to be extremely flexible. And I would say that if I were trying to create a sound for the Albany Symphony, it would be the opposite of that. It would be to create an orchestra that's immensely flexible and that can enter the world of a Brahms symphony or a Tchaikovsky symphony or a Stravinsky ballet or whatever it might be, or a Mozart symphony, with equal ease, whatever the period and the style.
I like that. I like it a lot. Yeah. Who comprises the orchestra? Are they people who are living in our community? People who,
Well, it's a fascinating, our personnel is a fascinating group of extremely diverse people. We're what's called a per-service orchestra, which means that unlike the New York Philharmonic, where everybody's on salary and they make, in the New York Philharmonic, they're very lucky, they make more than $100,000 a year, and there are 108 members or however many for whom that is their daily, weekly job. They may teach around the edges of that. We're differently configured in that our players are drawn from all over because we're a smaller budget regional orchestra, although of course fully professional. And so our players don't make their principal living from working with the Albany Symphony. Okay. It's one of the many things that they do, but hopefully it's one of the most important things. So in a way, that's actually a great benefit in the modern day, because we're able to pull fantastic players from all over. So I would say that about 50% of our players come from a 100-mile radius of the capital region. So while we have a number in Albany and Troy and Schenectady and Saratoga, we also have people coming from Williamstown and New Lebanon and places like that. But then the other half of the orchestra, the other 50% of the orchestra, really is drawn from New York City and Boston and even Montreal. And our tuba player flies in from Houston, where he's a graduate student. For a long time, our principal principal trombone player was in Cleveland, and she would fly in for weeks at a time to be with us. Because we don't play every single week. We may play for 2 weeks and then have a week off. And so it's a fully professional part-time orchestra. And because we're so close to New York and Boston and Montreal, our player pool is just fantastically it's just fantastic. Whereas, if you were in an orchestra similarly positioned as we are to be per service, and you were in Kentucky somewhere or Nebraska, you wouldn't have the same level of player to draw on. But because we're so close to New York and Boston, we routinely get the very best young players coming out of the greatest conservatories in the world who want very much to come play with us. So if you haven't heard the orchestra, if your listeners, your viewers haven't heard the orchestra recently, the orchestra plays at the most astounding level. I think that's maybe the thing that people are most surprised about when they come to hear the Albany Symphony. It's just how brilliant an ensemble of musicians we have right here in our own capital region.
That's true. Now, people don't come here just, the orchestra players just don't come to play a concert. They have to come from rehearsal, too. So what is the rehearsal process?
We generally rehearse 4 times for our subscription concerts.
Okay.
Different types of concerts. We may have a few less rehearsals or even a few more rehearsals. When we're recording, we've done a great deal of commercial recording, of making CDs. Those we tend to try to get an extra rehearsal or 2. But it tends to be 4 rehearsals, always within the week of the concert, sometimes spread out over the week and sometimes very compact, really starting a day or 2 before the concert. So what's really interesting, I think some people who don't know that much about behind the scenes orchestra life, sometimes, for example, recently we did a Mozart opera concert with 4 young soloists. And literally I met 3 of the soloists the day before the first concert. And then we put this whole program, very complicated program together, but because everybody knew their parts and everybody's done this before and we all worked together wonderfully, by the time after our 48 hours of being together, we sounded like a real ensemble with these singers.
That's the glory of having professionals,
It is
know their
indeed.
stuff.
They work so quickly. It's astounding how much one can get done with really high-level professionals.
Now you tend to, or the orchestra tends to have themes. You establish themes, and this year's theme for the whole season is Listen Adventurously. And then you actually have, for each concert, a thematic title. Why do you do that?
How or why?
Why both?
Well, I think why, there are a couple of reasons. One, I like concerts that sort of take you on a journey and while they entertain you, open your eyes to something that maybe you never thought of, or even educate in a very entertaining way. So I tend to favor concerts that have a cohesion about them, rather than just doing the old standard thing of, from column 1 pick an overture, column B pick a concerto, column 3 pick a symphony. I like concerts that somehow tell a story.
Okay.
So that may be part of the reason why our concerts tend to often be thematic. So for example, we may in fact do a concert like that, but our opening concert this season was an Italian night. And so it happened, the only thing that tied it together was that all the music was either Italian or inspired by Italy. So we did 2 movements of Vivaldi's 4 Seasons, and we did a beautiful Respighi little tone poem about Baroque music, The Birds, and we did the world premiere of a new composition, a new violin concerto by a brilliant young Italian composer, and we did Mendelssohn's Italian Symphony. Mendelssohn's not even Italian, but it was a piece inspired by Italy, and we had this fabulous young Italian violinist, Lorenza Borani, come over from Italy to be our soloist. So to me, that's a beautiful concert that happens to be Italian, and I just think that kind of gives the audience a little more, a sort of more interesting reason to come. It's also a very strong marketing idea in that it gives our marketing department really something to sell in a very cohesive way. And then also I like the idea of having a very loose theme through the season. So while Listen Adventurously is our tagline and our very powerful message for the season, there's also a kind of through theme this year, which is unbeknownst to the public. It's called the visual world. And what I tried to do this year was create concerts around themes that have to do with the other arts, and particularly the visual arts. So we did a movie gala in October, and we're doing narrated works in March and April, and we did this opera program. So it's all about sort of exploring works that involve music and other art forms.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, forgive me for this, but we're hearing a lot more of this stuff too in television commercials. We're hearing a lot more little bits and pieces of music, opera, and so that might have an appeal to people as well. You perform in several places, and you've added. Is it recently you've added the Canfield Casino?
Well, the Canfield Casino isn't that recent. We've been playing there, I think, for 7 or 8 years.
Okay.
It's been quite a time. We've recently added Pittsfield,
right,
and we're very excited because we've been in a lovely church in downtown Pittsfield, but they've just renovated their beautiful colonial theater right on the main street there next to the museum. And so in February we'll be doing our first concert with the Colonial Theater, in the Colonial Theater.
I'm leading to the live experience of being in a concert hall, and you know, it really is so different from listening to a recording. And albeit live performances come close, but they just don't have the total experience that you have when you're in a live space.
And I should say also that, I mean, we're very fortunate in that we have, well, one of the greatest halls of the world here in the Capital Region, and that's the Troy Savings Bank Music Hall, of course. And I must say that the Palace Theater, you know, the Palace Theater is much bigger than Troy. It's more than double the size. And even though it's not as legendary a hall as the Troy Hall, it's an incredibly beautiful venue for playing concerts and for listening to music, especially up in the balcony. In fact, my wife, when it's a big orchestra, she I think even prefers that to Troy.
Rather be there.
It's so rich and beautiful and well modulated. But the Troy Hall is truly one of the legendary halls of the world. In fact, when George Zell, the legendary conductor of the Cleveland Orchestra, used to tour the East Coast in the 1950s, he would insist that the Cleveland Orchestra stop in Troy and play a concert just so that the players could have the experience of playing in that hall, because it's so great. So I would say that particularly in a hall like the Troy Hall, the live concert experience is so much more powerful than any CD or radio broadcast you can possibly hear, because you literally can feel the wind in your hair, and it's so immediate. It's almost like the orchestra's in your lap. And I find that true also in the smaller venues we play. We play in Canfield Casino in Saratoga and in Pittsfield, and we often play with smallish orchestra because those are small venues. And there's something so communal about the experience. You know, it's like the difference between television evangelism and going to church, I suppose. You know that, yeah, you can get excited watching something on television, but it's never the same as being in the room, or live theater, and you know, and film. Film is wonderful, or TV is wonderful, but the experience of live theater is so powerful and so unique. It really can't be compared.
Absolutely, not only for the ears, but I think, you know, for the whole body. I mean, if you can actually feel it in your body, it's such an experience.
And also the other thing that I think is so powerful about our live concerts is because of this programming angle, because we play so much interesting living music, and because we do create concerts that I think are often very unique juxtapositions of different works that shed light on the various works, you know, each piece shedding light on the other works. You don't usually have the same experience when listening to radio or to CDs.
Now you do recordings. You have quite a few recordings with the orchestra. Do all or most of the recordings happen at the Troy Music Hall?
They all do, virtually all, yeah. And I should say also that they're all recordings of works that have either never been recorded or have almost never been recorded. I really think not only because we love the American repertoire and the contemporary repertoire we work with much of the time, but even more so because my belief is there's very little reason to re-record the classics that have been recorded, you know, 18,000 times. That adding, it's very exciting, and my wife always makes the point to me that, you know, to play a Beethoven Ninth Symphony live for our Capital Region public is a very important service we provide. However, I would argue that to make a CD of the Albany Symphony and David Miller's version of Beethoven 9, however fabulous they may be, is not nearly as meaningful as to take a beautiful work that we've discovered or that we've commissioned and make the only recording of that. I think that's a far more compelling thing to be able to do.
I agree. This year, I believe, if I'm right, there are 23 world premieres in the series?
That's probably true, but I should qualify that and say that on all of our subscription concerts, not even on all, but on most of our subscription concerts, we try to do, you know, basically one new work, and we surround it with interesting classic works that shed light on it and vice versa. So when the 23 number is a little bit, I don't want to say misleading, but maybe it's a little misleading in that most of those works are played during our American Music Festival.
Okay.
Because on our American Music Festival,
That
we
makes
also have our Dogs of Desire concert, which features 7 or 8 world premieres. And then we're also doing this fabulous thing in March as part of the festival, Capital Recollection. We've commissioned 16 solo works inspired by individual paintings on the concourse in the Empire Plaza, you know, those great expressionist New York School paintings that Nelson Rockefeller collected for the state. We've commissioned individual works for individual instruments, so we're doing a day where we're going to do 16 commissions of solo works, a fascinating project, but not part of our core subscription series. So while living music is very much a part of what we do, I don't want to give the impression that that's mainly what we do, and that we're
if you look
recently we just did this all Mozart concert. January is all Russian music by, sadly, only by dead Russian guys, no living Russian guys, but very good dead guys. As dead guys go, they're some of the best.
The best dead guys, I love it.
February, on the other hand, we have 2 brilliant young Greek composers writing pieces, along with Beethoven's 6th Symphony. So that's probably more representative of what we normally do.
And we talked about the sound, we've already mentioned that, but there's a signature, I think, with Albany, I believe, with Albany Symphony, and that is the really commitment to American music. Why?
Well, I think the original reason, which went very far before my tenure, Peter Colonie was the longtime chairman of the orchestra, and he really had a passion for particularly American romantic music, because a lot of American experimental modernist music was heard, but there were a number of really beautiful American composers, sort of beyond the famous ones, Copland, Bernstein, and Gershwin, particularly those who wrote in the 1940s and 50s, composers like William Schumann, Peter Menon, Roy Harris, Howard Hanson, who wrote really gorgeous music, and because the taste of the time was really against Romanticism, their music never, Morton Gould, another great example,
right.
Their music was never sufficiently heard. And so in Peter's tenure, we spent a lot of time going back and exhuming a lot of these works that had only been played once, and we still do that. But I guess my passion, even more than that, is to find the most exciting living voices today. So particularly with an emphasis on American music, but also on, we're actually branching out into world music again,
okay.
and we did a beautiful group of Portuguese composers recently and Italian composers, and we're hoping to do a French composer soon. I guess my belief is that for the art form to really survive and flourish, we need to forever be rejuvenating the repertoire and adding to the repertoire. And what's very exciting about the present is, unlike 25 or 30 years ago, when most of the new music being written was very austere, very modernist, frankly very ugly, very hard for audiences to assimilate, today there are so many composers who are writing really glorious, beautiful music that's informed by the classics, but is also very much of our own time. I think of my good friend Michael Torkey, whose music we've played a great deal, and audiences here and everywhere just love his music. It's gorgeous in the way that Ravel is gorgeous, or Stravinsky's gorgeous, or even Tchaikovsky's gorgeous. And so we love to do music that sounds beautiful, but that's of our own time.
I can recollect a time when I'd see a concert program and say, oh, I really don't want to go because that's there. And I think New York Philharmonic people would walk out when they would hear Boulez or something like that. But people seem to be receptive. They expect it.
I actually get more concern on the part of the public when I don't play a new piece than when I do play a new piece. I used to get, when I first got here, I would get the occasional angry letter, but now when I don't play a new piece, I get the occasional angry letter, which is wonderful, because I think our audience loves the journey of meeting a new composer and hearing a new work and assimilating, is it good, is it bad, do I love it, should it have a life, what is the composer trying to say? It I think, is another reason that makes the live concert experience so much more exciting in certain ways than the, listening on your CD. In that you're discovering music, and you, in essence, are judging whether this music deserves to have a life.
Well, there's an education piece too, where you have, and also the composer has, talked about the piece before it's performed.
We always do a lot of that. We do pre-concert talks. We have a Thursday noon library talk that we do with the composer that our volunteer group Vanguard sponsors. We do a pre-concert talk an hour before the concert, and then I always have the composer speak about his or her piece in the body of the concert. And I find our public is fantastic. In fact, whenever anybody comes to visit, guest artists, soloists, guest composers, they marvel at the sophistication of the Capital Region audience. Because people are arguing in the restroom at the intermission as to was that a good piece, was that a bad piece, did the composer achieve what he or she set out to do? It's a very alive, fluid, vital kind of happening when we have a concert.
Now, in the piece we saw, there was mention of the fact that you have a good attendance and seats are filled. But is that a challenge in today's world, to get people to take time out of their busy schedule and go to a symphony concert?
I think it is a challenge. It's a challenge as much as any form of entertainment is today. To get people away from their home media centers or whatever they're called to come out. I think that again, churches and synagogues face the same problem, and community centers do, and the only ones who seem to be really succeeding at it are health clubs and the YMCA, because people want to go out and work out.
At least after the turn of the year.
Even the mall, I think, is beginning. I'm delighted to see to have a harder time pulling people out of their houses to come shop on Saturday night, which didn't used to be the case. But I don't think that's the biggest problem, the biggest challenge we face, in that our audience is very committed and involved and engaged and growing. And we're doing concerts. We just recently did our first ever Magic of Christmas concert to 2 filled houses, and people were lining up to come to that concert. So I think as we develop new products, new projects, there is a huge audience out there that I think embraces and is eager to embrace what we do. The greater challenge is making sure that the community understands that the face of the Albany Symphony that they see is actually only a little part of what we do. And the reason that the arts and orchestras in particular are so expensive to run and to operate is that there's a whole sort of parallel universe that we're engaged in that isn't revenue producing. You know, we're so involved in education. We have this gigantic adopt-a-school program that we're running in schools through the district, and we have so many education outreach sort of different projects that we're doing that are not funded by ticket sales, and ticket sales only make up, you know, roughly a third of our income. So there's so many other things, maybe not even quite a third of our income. So we have to somehow make up our income in other ways, you know, through foundations, corporations, sponsorships, but certainly through the support of individuals. That's probably our most significant area of support, is that individuals who care about the orchestra and care about arts being in the community and care about their kids having exposure to arts, et cetera, those are the people who really make our existence possible.
I was going through the webpage, and I mean, you talked about the Adopt-a-School. There's so many different programs that you offer. I mean, you have a real focus on connecting with young people and building, I presume, building an audience. Eventually, anyway. Right,
we have a beautiful young audience for our family concerts, for our Sunday symphonies. You know, we do 3 family concerts every year, Sunday afternoons, and that's one of our biggest publics of kids, you know, 12 years old and under, and their parents and their grandparents. And so we've done a lot of work in cultivating that public, as you say, because that is the audience of the future. And what I find so encouraging in our region is so many, particularly the suburban schools, but the schools throughout the region, have really vital music programs. So these kids play instruments, they study cello and violin and trumpet, and they care about music. So it's a natural fit that they should want to come see what our great orchestra is doing, and that we should be able to help cultivate them. So in addition to all of our Adopt-a-School projects where we're bringing instrumentalists into the schools, we're also doing very exciting things like bringing composers into schools to help kids learn how to compose, you know, in a very basic way. But it's amazing, you know, kids today don't even have any idea that a composer, someone who creates music, can be a living, breathing person. So we actually right now are in the middle of a very big residency with 4 composers, part of which is bringing them into schools and having them create incredibly creative, collaborative projects with school kids.
That's wonderful. I was a kid who was bent towards this. I mean, I liked music. When I first heard, you know, classical music or opera, I just wanted more of it. But I would imagine there would be a challenge, let's say, going into an inner city school. I mean, maybe the perception that you'd go in there and these kids don't want to, why would I want to listen to this stuff? You know, dead composers or something that's, you know, whatever. They'd rather listen to their contemporary music, but
That's totally wrong.
Totally wrong.
Couldn't be further from the truth. I think particularly in inner city, in our experience, kids are so hungry for any new and interesting experience, anything enriching, anything eye-opening. We did a project a few years back where we had a young, very compelling young composer, Arthur Bloom, created a piece for 5th grade class and orchestra called the young person's, no, it's called The Orchestra's Guide to the Young Person. It's all about a kid who goes to a concert and falls asleep and has dreams, and it features a whole 100-member kid choir, and so we went into first a suburban school one year and then into Philip Schuyler Elementary right in downtown Albany the second year, and I don't think we've ever had the same kind of positive response from the kids, from the teachers, from the community in terms of these kids were so receptive and so eager to do art of any kind. They don't care if it's a trombone as opposed to a boom box, or whether it's a piano as opposed to a synthesizer. They just love any new interesting artistic experience.
And the experience.
And are hungry for it.
That's wonderful to hear, it really is. Because you hear about the death of this opera or whatever.
I don't think so. I don't think that anything's dying. I think that things are changing. Everything's in flux, and taste changes from era to era and from year to year. If you look at the world of popular culture, I mean, you see how this television show which is hot this year is gone the next year, right. and this pop group that's hot this year is gone 15 minutes later, and things change and tastes change. But I think that a passionate interest in art in a general way isn't something that's going away.
That's great to hear.
As long as we stay vital.
Now, I know that you talked about money and people, supporting the arts and supporting the orchestra. Subscription. People generally, you have a large subscription base.
We do. We'd love it to be larger.
Okay.
And the whole, again, there's the received wisdom is that at one time everyone says, it used to be that everybody would subscribe, that you would have all your attendees would buy 12 concert. Or I remember when I was a kid growing up in Los Angeles, my dad and I had a 24-week subscription to the LA Philharmonic. That, 30 years ago, that was considered the norm. And that, people are more, there's more impulse buying. People don't make their decisions until late. There's so many pressures on people that most people don't commit ahead of time. But I think that, the death knell that has been rung for subscription is a little naive, and that I think a lot of people still like the idea of, we play a major subscription concert once a month. So it's not like we're asking people to come out every weekend. But the idea of, one Friday or Saturday a month being symphony night is certainly realistic. And our subscription series is 8 concerts basically, plus 1 special. So we've been very successful with 8 concert subscriptions, with 4 concert subscriptions. We've looked at different ways to package them. We have a Palace Theater subscription. We have a Saratoga subscription. But at the same time, I think that it's true that we're now online, and people can find us online and have easier access to last-minute tickets and all that. So we've tried to keep up with the trends. And I think that certainly, there's a great deal of potential growth for us in both areas, in individual ticket sales, last-minute ticket sales, and we spend a lot of energy, marketing energy on that, but also on building our subscription base.
And someone doesn't have to get the subscription from the beginning. They can come in at any time.
Absolutely, and they can actually get a flexible subscription, and there are all sorts of opportunities, different options. So depending on what your needs are, if you need 4 concerts or 8 concerts, if you want to be here or there, there's a great deal of flexibility.
Okay, we're going to put the web page up, the web address. We're also going to put a phone number, I believe, that someone could call if they want more information. Let's talk about, we're ending a year, but we're starting a new one, and there's concerts coming up. Would you like to talk a bit about those?
Well, sure. The spring this year is, I think, one of the most exciting time periods we've ever had in terms of our concerts. I think I mentioned the January concert is this beautiful all-Russian program with Albany Musica, Tchaikovsky's 4th Symphony, as well as some big, gorgeous choral Russian pieces, Borodin, Polovetzian dances with chorus, and the Tchaikovsky 1812 with chorus, and this amazing scene, the coronation scene from Mussorgsky's opera Boris Godunov. So that's a glorious, vocal, symphonic Russian spectacular. February, this beautiful Greek night with these 2 works inspired by Greek myth. One with the St. Sophia Greek Church Choir, called the Voyages of Odysseus, all about Odysseus' journeys. The other all about Orpheus, and then also Beethoven's 6th Symphony, the Pastoral. March, we've got this amazing month-long American Music Festival. We'll have music of Bernard Herrmann, one of the great movie composers of all times, who wrote all those Hitchcock movies. Right. We're kind of doing a whole Herrmann retrospective on that concert, and we're actually doing recording of Herrmann. And then also a beautiful new piece, narrated piece, by Peter Child, one of our resident composers, and a brilliant violin concerto by George Santakis, another of our resident composers. So a very exciting American month with all sorts of stuff going on in March. I hope people will check out the website. April, we've got Bill Kennedy doing an amazing project. We've commissioned a violin concerto inspired by Roscoe, his most recent novel, and he's going to be reading short selections from Roscoe within the body of the concert in advance of the different movements of this beautiful violin concerto that Kevin Beavers has written. Exciting thing, because we've got Itzhak Perlman coming to close our season with the Beethoven Violin Concerto, and we're going to do Stravinsky's Firebird Suite. It's going to be a glorious evening. We've never had Perlman with the orchestra before. He's an absolutely legendary figure. So that'll be a great, fabulous close to our amazing season.
Absolutely. Sounds great to me. I'm going to pull back a bit, because along with the Kennedy and the Roscoe piece, you're also doing a Bruckner symphony.
We are, in fact.
And I must admit, I love Bruckner.
Oh, that's
and
great.
I've never heard Bruckner live, so
that is the most magical thing to hear live. You'll be amazed. It sounds like no other music in the world, except maybe Schubert, a little bit like Schubert.
I argue with people all the time, but anyways, I still love it.
Beautiful stuff.
David, we're coming close to the end of the program today, and we've covered a lot of territory. Is there anything that we've missed that you can think of?
Well, I don't think so. I think we've covered the brilliance of the orchestra and the beauty of our halls, and the fact that this is such a. The only other thing I would mention is, and I sort of touched on it, is how impressive a community this is. And I think that really, I mean it when I say that's the reason I've been here as long as I have, is that I think that everything is possible here. And it's a very exciting time for the region, with all of the Tech Valley initiative and all of the incredible growth that's occurring, exciting sort of forward-looking growth. And the symphony, I think, fits in with that, and we've worked to make ourselves kind of the orchestra of the future. Not only because we play living music along with the great classics of the past, but because the way we configure ourselves, we've tried to really be really visionary in dreaming of how an orchestra should act in the future, what it should offer. So my hope is just that all of your great residents here in Colonie will come on down and sample the symphony if they don't already, because it's a great community resource.
Well, you give it a lot of excitement, so hopefully they'll pick that up and do it as well. One thing I just thought of while you were talking was you also mentioned somewhere in maybe it's in the season literature, it's not only a listening experience, but you talk about seeing and hearing. Seeing the orchestra, you may have visuals as well, but it's a total experience.
It is indeed. And a very exciting one. And I should also mention, the one thing I didn't fully mention is that we do have 2 more family concerts. So for people with kids, in both, I think, March and April, in each of those months, Sunday afternoons, we have a fabulous 1-hour introduction to the orchestra, and those are always themed, and I dress up as Cowboy Dave in one of them, and they're really a lot of fun, and the kids have a great time, and it's a great introduction to the orchestra. And talking about visual, that's as visual and as theatrical as we get. So if people haven't yet brought their young kids to the symphony, that's the perfect entrance.
Well, thank you again, David. It was a pleasure having you here today.
It was my pleasure to be with you.
And thanks for joining me on Getting to Know You. I hope you liked today's interview. I sure did, and I want you to go hear a concert of the Albany Symphony Orchestra. Until next week, have a good one.